Ding, 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 ding.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends, and today's host, Nick, and with me is
Tom
and KJ.
Great to have you back as always. Additionally, joining us as a guest for this episode is
Roxanne.
Thanks for joining us today, Roxanne. Roxanne and Tom are dating. Roxanne is quite familiar with Jane Austen and her works, but we are discussing Marie Antoinette today. Roxanne also conveniently likes movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, which consists of 2 rounds of 3 questions to determine who will earn today's trivia crown. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we follow it up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. Today's movie was suggested to us by Tom. This week, we'll be jumping into 2006 biography, drama, history, Marie Antoinette, directed by Sofia Coppola, also known for The Virgin Suicides, The Beguiled, and Lost in Translation. Other movies that would have been in theaters with Marie Antoinette include The Happy Feet, Pan's Labyrinth, Casino Royale, and The Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause. Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about this movie and why this would be a fun one for us to discuss today?
Thanks, Nick. So the plot of this movie is exactly what you think it is. It starts with Marie Antoinette waking up in her Austrian home, age 14, going off to France to be married to Louis Auguste, who was later crowned Louis XVI. And some of the initial conflicts she has to deal with are sleeping and getting pregnant by her husband, something they have trouble doing since they are 15 and 14 years old, dealing with a court that's at times hostile to an Austrian, or even just hostile to an outsider, or hostile to someone who appears not to be doing her duty as a wife. It is also about her response to this hostility, her ability to kind of seize decorative pleasures, to become a fashion icon, to embrace the soft and the beautiful all around her and transcend these troubles. And it ends with her leaving Versailles as the French Revolution is breaking out and this world of glitz and glamour and beauty finally coming to an end. One of the reasons I selected this is I won't say this is a brilliant movie or a genius movie in the tradition of a lot of the films we've been watching, right? It's not Night of the Hunter or M, but it is an incredibly beautiful film, and it celebrates decadence, and it celebrates excess, and that's why I really liked it. It's over the top, it's too much, and it loves being too much, and it recognizes fashion not as an aspect of shallowness or some crap like that, but as an artwork that that can kind of fill up these kind of cultural traditions or these practices that otherwise we might find empty. KJ, I'll send it to you. What are your thoughts?
So this movie had been in my Netflix watch list for a while, but I never quite hit the play button. So I was really excited we were doing it for Talking Pictures Trivia. Anything I've seen, Kirsten Dunst has been great. She's been great in it. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, maybe the Spider-Man, but yeah, she's been really good in almost anything. I didn't realize this was by Sofia Coppola. That was kind of a pleasant surprise. Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm a sucker for biopics and historical biopics, so I love seeing people's interpretation of historical figures' lives, and I think Sofia Coppola did great with it. The soundtrack was a little strange, but the colors, the sets, the dresses, the costumes, the makeup, I mean everything. I really enjoyed it. But the only thing I'm a little nervous about is this is a movie that I don't think I'll ever remember the details. I feel like it's a movie you could watch over and over and over again because the details of the movie weren't that important. It was really just the look and the feel. So I'm a little nervous about the questions tonight because I don't know how many of these I'm going to get. I got to keep my reputation up here. How about you, Nick? How'd you feel about the movie?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this movie. And before I share them, I actually just wanted to speak about one of the things Tom brought up about their ages. And I think this movie did not really showcase that well enough. I knew that she was young. I did not realize how young King Louis XVI was based on the portrayal of this film. So that makes some sense out of some of my challenges with this movie. But I guess I'll go right into it. So to begin with, I'm always wary of historical pieces that embrace modern themes in music. But fortunately, I thought it was actually going to be a larger offender than it was. One of my examples of a movie that I don't particularly like how much they go into that is the movie with Heath Ledger, A Knight's Tale. They really lay on bringing modern times into medieval times. I thought this was going to be something to that degree. And they did have elements of it, which I'm sure we're going to discuss, but it wasn't as much as I feared. The other part of this film, and talking about how everything looked and felt and all the different decadence and all of that, we really spent the first hour and 20 minutes of this film figuring out if the characters portrayed by Jason Schwartzman and Kirsten Dunst would consummate their marriage. Okay, it took a lot of time for us to get to this point. And then we got into some interesting elements, or at least in my opinion. I thought there was going to be more historical references involved in this movie. They kind of were part of a loose background to what was going on in their lives. And really, those were my favorite parts. Just like KJ said about the biopics, the historical part, I thought this was going to have more of that in this. And it was really not the main event of this movie. And I understand that may not have been the purpose of it, but I think that's what I was looking for when I went into this experience. I will say, similar to going back to what KJ says, I enjoyed the performances. I thought the actors were spot on. I thought all of that dialogue was good, but I just felt the overall film fell short of what I expected to be. It's not that it was bad. It's not great, but it's not something I would necessarily recommend unless it was a very unique audience. Roxanne, what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, guys. This is great. But so this movie is one that I saw when it first came out in theaters. I must have been like 15 or 16. I actually haven't seen it in a while. So revisiting this movie after a few years was really interesting. And I remember kind of all the reasons why I originally was really drawn to the movie. Which is to say the luscious costumes. Around the time when I first saw this movie was when I was just getting really into period dramas. And that's like what I talk about a lot in my own like academic career is that vein of things now, or at least that's a significant part of it. And I actually didn't really kind of put that together until today. But this is one of those movies that kind of just began in general. And I had always also enjoyed things that Kirsten Dunst had been in. And it was definitely something that was different from the usual fare that I had seen up to that point, right? Like what you said with the soundtrack, that kind of thing. I thought it was kind of bizarre in a fun way. And I think if you think about some of the stuff that was also coming around, not even just that year, but in the years surrounding that, when I kind of place it, because I was in high school at the time, and some of the films that were coming out around that time have this same kind of quirky vibe that was very, I guess, cool to like in some regard. Like Juno, I think it came out the next year. And Across the Universe also came out, I think the next year or the year after that. But even though they're all very different films, they kind of have these soundtrack heavy, very quirky, very sometimes, at least maybe in Across the Universe, a little bit like this, a little bit of like nihilism and hedonism thing going on, that I think that I guess all of those things kind of come together for me when I think about this particular film. And then also I love the history surrounding the French Revolution, Marie Antoinette as well, and I was always big into that. So this kind of hits a lot of different buttons for me, I think, as a movie.
Great. And I'm sure we're going to explore a lot of those elements throughout these questions. But before we get into those questions, we have a critical question for you. What snack do you recommend enjoying while watching Marie Antoinette?
This is easy. You would want to get a full sleeve of macarons and a big bottle of champagne, preferably to yourself.
That makes sense. And I love when they're up in the club, you know, with all the champagne pouring. So very interesting times. I think that's a perfect choice.
It's time for Movie Quiz.
Here we go for round one. Now, here are the rules. Each question in round one is worth 1 point. There are 2 alternative questions for round one, and there's an added little wrinkle. You can either select an alternative question and just go for the points, or you can target someone and try to take those points from another person. However, if you lose those points and they go to the person you targeted. So those are your options: the question, the alternative, or the target. I am going to let Roxanne pick as our esteemed guest, and here are the categories. Round one takes place at Versailles. The categories are robe à la polonaise, robe à la Levite, robe à panier.
I'm going to go with robe à la panier.
And before I ask the question, does anybody want to jump in with an alternative or with a target?
I think I'll risk the first one being the actual question, and when we get desperate, we'll start handing out points. I imagine.
I was trying to take Tom's points from last week, but you know.
All right, here we go.
It's time for question 1.
What custom does Marie Antoinette introduce into France that appears to be initially popular, but by the end of the film has lost its purchase on the crowd?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in.
Okay, so since KJ, you answered last, you have to go first. What do you have?
Marie Antoinette introduces clapping either during or at the end of a show, which I guess everybody kind of enjoys, but by the end she loses favor. So they don't want to clap anymore for the people. The clapping.
All right, thank you. Roxanne, you locked in second. So what do you have?
I too was going to say clapping. She begins clapping at the end of an opera. And then at the end, that doesn't work out so well anymore.
All right, thank you. And Nick, our speedy lock in. What do you have?
Yes, it's the applause and appreciation for the performance.
Okay, and that is a point to everyone. Well done, team. So the reason I bring this question here is I'm interested in the effect she has on this kind of aristocratic courtly world, and how that's measured or how that's changing over time, and what you guys thought of that. What did you think of her in terms of how she embraces or neglects her responsibilities vis-a-vis that position of the female leader of France, the trendsetter in France?
I'm glad you used the word embrace. So this is a minor item, but one of the things that I remember from this movie is everyone there is in France, once she crosses the border, is super stuffy. Okay. They have all their protocols and whatnot. And what does she do? She's a hugger. Okay. She goes big up and gives a big hug. That is not the protocol. So I just thought that was interesting. I'm not saying that everyone started going around hugging, but already we see that she is possibly a trendsetter or acts a little differently than they're accustomed to. So I thought that was an interesting introduction into to the things to come.
Yeah. So that scene that you mentioned when she's like crossing the border, right? That entire scene is like as historically accurate as they can make it. Like all of that stuff happened. They took away her dog. They stripped her naked. That it was, it was as historically accurate as they could completely make it. And what I think is interesting is like you see her coming into the world of France, and everybody's like pushing on her. It's like, you're going to be like this. This is how you're going to dress. This is the dog you're going to have. These are the people you're going to hang out with. And then you see her as she kind of faces more trials, especially in terms of her kids and that kind of thing, and realizing that she has to survive in some way. She starts to have her own impact in other areas, I guess, right? And she starts putting her own impression on France. which obviously is met at first, with some level of hostility. But seeing her do that, I thought was a really interesting kind of juxtaposition there.
Another part of the movie where they explore that further is later when the husband, the king, gives her own place to live, like her own retreat, if you will. I mean, it's a pretty magnificent retreat. And there's a certain scene where one of the royals say, hey, this lady needs to be invited here. And she's like, this is where I go to stay away from all of that, nonsense, all of the protocol. That was her escape. And she found a way to still do it within her parameters. But when she couldn't change them, she changed her location to live the way she wanted to live.
Yeah, that estate was interesting because I think a lot of times with these films and with fiction, when you take a whole person's life and you boil it down to 2 hours, you need to leave a lot of stuff out, which makes me think we need to infer some stuff that may not have made it to the film. And one of the things I was thinking is they have that whole estate for her, which seems like it's to give her a place where she doesn't have to be proper and French. But I also wondered how much was she influencing France? So it gave France a place to be protected from her influence on France, right? Did she upset the status quo enough that they're like, you know what, let's get her out of the public eye? And I don't know. I've not. I know nothing about Marie Antoinette except maybe, her famous quote. But I was also wondering if that was a two-way street. It wasn't just a place for her to have a retreat. It was a place to stop her from influencing and radicalizing France.
Well, I mean, I don't think she's radicalizing France. She seems to meet. I wouldn't even say she meets them halfway. I think she embraces her role. She just
I was
finds.
going to say, Tom, I think France was radicalizing around her.
Yeah, well, they're radicalizing in opposition to her, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think she's embracing her role, but also trying to find pockets of freedom within that role. I don't think it's necessarily like she's the changes she makes to the court life or whatnot, like applauding at the opera. They're temporary and they're not particularly major. They're a little bit of authority that she is able to generate. The fact that she was able to set a sort of a kind of a code of what you wore. I mumbled my words there. That she set a kind of fashion standard at her home in the country. Petite Trianon is also reflexive of that. The fact that she's able to find these little pockets of freedom, and that did have an influence, right? People started dressing in a particular fashion to reflect that. But I think what the movie shows you isn't her dominating France. It's about decadence as temporary liberation, but always temporary.
I also think, Tom, not just decadence, but almost indifference. There's only a few scenes where they were like, oh, I need to, okay, I got a good example for it. She wanted giant oak trees put up, and she's been spending all this money, and the person says to her pretty much, oh, you spent all your money, you can't, give money to your few charities. And she's like, oh, well, maybe I can beg the king for some more money. So it wasn't really on the top of her list for the country, at least within the confines of the movie. They didn't really show that she was a woman of the people or anything like that. It was just at some points just kind of to appease. And that's what I meant by indifference.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting part about the movie too, is that they just the film almost could have been called Versailles, because it's so much just about what's going on in Versailles as this bubble where like nothing really ever comes in or goes out, just like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. She's indifferent because she doesn't know. Like she's not in touch with the real world. She's kind of in this bubble of Versailles, and she's kind of supposed to be kept that way. And she was also massively undereducated, and they don't maybe make as much of a point about that maybe in the movie as is the historical case. But like it's not that she wasn't smart, but like she completely breezed by in her education, and that like she didn't really have one because she was one of the youngest daughters at court, so like nobody paid attention to her. So I almost wonder too if she didn't have a lot of the skills, I suppose, to kind of be aware of what's kind of going on around you. So when somebody's like, you don't have all this money for this stuff, like, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, money. Since when do I have to think about money? Like, just give me my trees.
Yeah, and the whole thing too. I mean, sometimes I use the word allude. It was pretty obvious that they were just showcasing her as like the naive rich person who can go party all night and come home, and life is just there to entertain her. So the movie was very thick on that mentality, presenting Marie Antoinette.
So what else would you expect her to do, given the information she has in the world she's in? Right? How else would you expect a person who's lived this life and really has not a lot of contact out of Versailles, and whose life is incredibly regulated, despite the party she gets to go to do in response to money problems, or the peasants don't have bread. These are these are not things that this person is trained to do, especially when she's either a teenager or sometime in her 20s. And it's interesting to talk about, Roxanne, your point about this could have just been called Versailles is pretty spot on. If you see the scenes where people start revolting, in the initial shots, it's just shots of Versailles with kind of the sound of crowds being piped in. So you don't even see until very late in the film the outside world touching Versailles, until basically she's pulled out of there at the very end of the film. You don't even see that outside conflict. The way it's filmed, it is absent. All it is a sound in the distance.
You also don't see the ramifications of their actions in this film too, the historical ramifications, which is interesting.
Are we ready for question number 2? This one goes to Nick. Nick, would you like robe à la polonaise or robe à la Levite?
I'm going to go with the Levite one.
And before I ask the question, would anybody like to grab an alternative? Remember, alternatives are worth more points too, so you would be able to get more points.
I'll do an alternative. I know one of our, well, I hope he listens, Pat Gavin out there would like to hear it. So I will do the alternative question. I'll be tribute.
Okay.
No diegetic questions though.
It might be.
There is no diegetic questions in this game.
Then it's not really an alternative.
Are they all diegetic?
I guess they're all diegetic. There's no non-diegetic questions.
Leitmotifs?
No, there's no leitmotifs either.
It's time for a leitmotif.
The anybody else want an alternative? You could either go for 2 or 3 points, KJ.
Oh, let's go for 3 points. And I'd like to try out the targeting system, and I'd like to target Nick Luis.
No, you can't take alternative and target.
Yeah, that's how target works.
Stay on target.
Okay. Roxanne, do you want traditional question or an alternative or a target?
Alternative.
The 3-point question is going to be asked. KJ's targeting Nick. Roxanne is not targeting anyone.
Wait, I didn't say what I'm doing.
You just said. You said you want to do. Do you want to change your mind?
I didn't know I was getting targeted.
Would you like to change from robe?
I would like to take an alternative and target.
Great.
KJ.
Would you like?
Hang on. Wait. This breaks the Pat Gavin rule. Then I would like to remain a target, but I'd like to go back to the regular question so we don't miss it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay, fine. I won't rock the boat. I'll stick with my original, normal
Nick,
question.
if it helps you feel better, he's not going to get it right.
I'm just happy to be here, so whatever.
I won't rock the boat. So I'll lock in with my original lock in.
Great. So we'll start with Nick's question.
It's time for question 2.
What is the one thing Marie Antoinette says to the Comtesse du Barry? She is the woman who is the mistress of Louis XV. So take a few minutes there, and then I'm going to ask KJ and Roxanne. Here is alternative question 2. The question, by the way, is called Robe à l'Orientale, which I just screwed up, but whatever. Here's the question. Before being crowned Queen of France, Marie Antoinette's 2 titles are what?
Locked in.
I'm locked in.
Yeah, I'm locked in.
All right, KJ, you answered last. So,
I'm rooting for you, KJ.
what are her two titles?
All right, so her two titles, here we go, the Duchess of Austria. I'm pretty sure she was from Austria, and the Keeper of Mugsy were her two titles.
Okay, that's an answer. All right, Nick, you locked in second. So, what do you have?
I hope it could be in the spirit of the phrase. I think it was something about the weather in Versailles.
Okay,
Ooh,
thank you.
can I since I targeted Nick and I'm at a pretty big risk for losing a lot of points here. If
Mhm.
I can answer
I think he
his
lost those
question,
points.
is there any?
No,
Oh no, that's not.
no,
Okay.
no.
Okay. And Roxanne, what do you have?
So Marie Antoinette, or Marie Antonia, was the Archduchess of something, and she was also the Dauphine of France.
So before you announce the points, can I answer Nick's question?
You can.
I'm pretty sure she said there's a lot of people here, which is something I say all the time. Anytime
Yep.
there's more than like four people.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was
But I still get
you
your
still
points.
get his points. Right. So you get 3 points. KJ loses 3 points, so he's at -2. And Roxanne gains 3 points for answering the question. She's the Archduchess and the Dauphine.
Neat.
Neat.
Nicely done.
And so that puts us at Roxanne has 4 points, Nick has 4 points, and KJ has -2.
Thanks,
I'm gonna be
KJ.
handing these out all night. This is gonna be...
All right, and we covered a little bit of what I wanted to talk about in this question, which was that kind of opening scene which you discussed, Roxanne, in a little more detail, and the her position in the court and what she's kind of responsible for doing is manifest right away. But let's talk about the relationship in the court and how she kind of manages these different characters, right? We know Comtesse du Barry is she's Louis XV's mistress. He's probably bought the title for her. That's the rumor in the court. And she's portrayed as this kind of like New York up and comer, you know what I mean? Like a upwardly mobile person in the court. And I was wondering what people thought about her and how that the court sociology, for lack of a better word, is structured and portrayed.
I really enjoy the casting for that. Oh, I can't remember the actress's name, but this casting in which she's got, you know, a very thick, and honestly, I'm not really sure which particular area, if it's like New York or New Jersey or what exactly it is. I'm from Illinois, so you'd have to help a lady out. But I thought that was an interesting take on that character, since she's supposed to be basically a prostitute made mistress. And then how are you supposed to get somebody who is the daughter of the Empress of Austria to acknowledge this woman who has come up, who was a prostitute, and is now the mistress of the king, and you have to acknowledge her when you have spent most of your life never paying attention to anybody really of that rank.
I also thought it was interesting where you just see their customs, and the other lady who you're talking about, right, the mistress, she can walk right by her, but she cannot address her first. Marie Antoinette has to start the dialogue for it to be proper, which was quite interesting just to see the layers of not even politics, but just procedure that occurs in Versailles and in France at that time. It was kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, I love those kind of rules. I should say, I don't love those rules in an actual society. I wouldn't want to have to live by them or adhere to them. But in either fiction or I guess is this historical fiction? I don't know exactly what you'd call it. But one of the things while I was watching this show it reminded me a lot of Game of Thrones. Hopefully, I don't get too many jeers here for bringing up Game of Thrones instead of an actual historical reference. But in Game of Thrones, you have similar situations. They don't appear on screen and not really in the book, but Tywin's father had a very similar situation to Louis XV with the mistress, and it plays a big role. Doesn't matter. But other historical fiction I've read, particularly some stuff in Japan, like the book Shogun, a lot of what makes it interesting is what society accepts and doesn't accept, and rules you have to follow, similar to who can talk to each other first. And once you do talk, what are the ramifications? What's said is usually important. In this movie, it didn't actually seem too important what Marie said to the mistress. But it does make for a very fun and dramatic situation usually.
I'm really glad you brought up Game of Thrones because it actually came to mind for a different topic. Tom asked earlier, what would you expect Marie Antoinette to be like? And there is a character called Marjorie Tyrell, who is a princess of the people and reaches out to the poor and all that. That is, of course, an idealized version of what a young, princess could be. And I know there's a reason that's fiction. And she does it for purpose, too, even within the story of Game of Thrones. But even on another note, the different procedures and all that, it actually did make me think a lot of that. Not the rest of it, of course, but just the fact that there was this hierarchy, there were greater families, there were different ways to present and titles. And again, that's where all this fiction comes from, is this and other medieval sources. But I actually my mind did go to the Game of Thrones direction as comparison for those two elements.
Let's do this. Let's promise this is the end of the Game of Thrones conversation, because I love Game of Thrones. But yes, Marjorie Tyrell, absolutely. But also aspects of Sansa's story, being stuck in another castle, so to say, in a foreign land and trying to deal with that. And even Cersei's walk of shame kind of reminded me of what Marie Antoinette eventually had to go through. So I feel like there's pieces of Marie Antoinette in a lot of the princesses and queens in A Song of Ice and Fire. But Nick, let's promise to. Yeah,
I don't know. No, you
okay.
don't have to go there. I just wanted to touch upon it because you went there.
I opened the floodgates.
I think a lot for me is what I liked about this movie, or what it traced for me, was her maturation, which I think is marked by many things, but one of them is her ability to kind of change associations, right? And so and change associations is sort of her way of managing the court at least as well as she can. And the Du Barry is just the Du Barry. I'm pretending like I can pronounce French, but the Du Barry episode is kind of an example of one of these court behaviors she goes into. Another one, though, is at the beginning of the movie, she's sort of stuck with these two aunties, played by Molly Shannon and Shirley Henderson. That's right. Sophie and Victoria. Throughout the movie, she then moves associations from them to Rose Byrne's character, the Duchess de Polignac. Polignac? Okay, Polignac.
Polagnac.
Yeah, the Duchess Polagnac. She's really great. She's quite a dresser, Polagnac is. But and the ability for her to bring in and shape her world using the associations she wants, which we learn may not be the best for her, but they allow her the escape into decadence that she needs.
And Rose Byrne's character was the closest to a rebel within French society. And of course, she was attracted to that right away.
Yeah, apparently Rose Byrne's character, the Duchess de Polignac, was supposed to be like super pretty, which solid casting with Rose Byrne. But that was also part of it's just like a court full of hotties, just kind of traipsing around with each other.
All right. Shall we get into question number 3?
KJ, get me some points.
Here they come.
All right. There is a 2-point alternative question still available if anybody wants to take it or target with it.
Is anybody taking it? If nobody's taking it, I gotta Pat Gavin this.
I'll take it.
So Roxanne's taking it?
No. I was gonna say I'm gonna stay with the regular question.
Okay.
So between you two.
Roxanne, you're taking the 2. Do you want to target or just go for 2 points?
I think I just want to go for 2 points.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
No, I'll stick with the regular question.
It's time for question 3.
During her first morning after her marriage, Marie Antoinette is introduced to a custom she finds ridiculous. What is that custom? And now for Roxanne, your alternative question. Marie Antoinette and her friends and her dogs engage in a shopping frenzy to the song I Want Candy by Bow Wow Wow. What major event inspires her to engage in some retail therapy?
I'm locked in on the standard question.
Locked in.
Oh, geez. Oh, locked in.
All right, very good. So Roxanne, you said it last, so you means you have to go first.
Okay, so the thing that happens is that somebody dies, and I can't remember who it is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
And then KJ, what do you have?
All right. So just because I don't know.
Answer the question.
Well, I want to answer both questions. Is that all right, Tom? If I take a stab
Go
at
for
both?
it.
All right. So so the alternate question, I think it's the birth of her nephew or niece that causes it, but I guess we'll find out. So that morning she wakes up, there's a bunch of things she finds ridiculous, and I think Kirsten Dunst displays this through the looks on her face. I don't think she actually says anything, but the one that they play for the joke is she can't dress herself, and the person of the highest rank has to be the one what dresses her, and they keep coming in one at a time, and she just wants to get dressed, and all these people keep coming in, so then the other person has to dress her, and so the dressing.
I have the same answer as KJ. She's trying to get dressed in the morning and she can't do it, and the person with the woman with the highest title in the room has to do it, and every time they're about to do it, someone with the higher title rank walks in the room, and it's a whole thing.
All right, and that's points for Nick and KJ. Sorry, Roxanne. But what inspires her retail therapy is the first bourbon prince of his generation is born to her brother-in-law and his wife.
Yep.
Yep, that's it, which sends her into tears. Good, and
I
yeah,
mean,
and so that brings us at the end of this round here. KJ with -1, Roxanne with 4, and Nick with 5. Hmm.
oh,
So I love the I want candy section of the movie. That's one of my favorite montages, and I think it's like the reason to watch this movie, or at least it's an example of the type of aspect of this movie that makes it worth watching.
I thought that one worked. There were a few times she used a modern song and it didn't work. Sometimes it came right before or after they were playing an in-movie song, like if they were at a ball and they were playing, I don't know, is it violins and cellos? But the I Want Candy one did work. And man, those macaroons, right? The macaroons were in that scene? Was it the macaroons?
yeah.
Oh, they looked, I don't know why they looked so good, but they looked so good, even though they were like pastel fluorescent almost. They were like hyper colorized, but yeah, that was a great scene.
Yeah, I think the color of the candy itself is part of that, right? You're supposed to be kind of awash in softness. That's all I think when I look at those great shoes also that keep getting pulled out is this they all look so soft. It's
It
like
makes you like want to participate in it like the entire time. I'm like, I want that. And I'm like, I'd never wear a wig or like have all those hair pieces that she has. Even though I'm pretty sure I do have a Marie Antoinette wig somewhere in the basement. But it's like, I want that, even though I obviously don't want that. And I want to like, I mean, I do want like a mountain of champagne or whatever, who doesn't? But it kind of really makes you want to just be part of it and revel in her excess and joy and just sit there kind of longingly looking at all the calories and how there are no consequences. She's just going to strap herself into a corset and and it's fine. Eat everything you want. Doesn't matter.
Going along with that scene, KJ was saying that this time it worked with the modern music. I would say that's true. A lot of the other times it did take me out of the movie, as I mentioned even in my intro. But one of the things I wanted to bring up about this sequence, and I'm not sure if you all caught it, but it stood out to me like a sore thumb. When she's going through the different high heels, there's a pair of purple, bluish Converse style sneakers, which are definitely not period specific, that are on display as she's trying shoes on. And I looked it up after the movie, of course, because I was like, did I just see a pair of cons in this movie? And apparently, Sofia Coppola put them there on purpose to show that she's this, still like this modern teenager exploring and all that stuff. But those elements, I get it, but I don't necessarily like them in the film. But that's just my opinion.
Is it the modern elements you don't like, or the
Yeah,
fashion?
that they just like. Well, usually it's the songs, because sometimes I find they clash. The "I on Candy" song did actually work, but there's other sequences. I think KJ was saying that too. That it just did not feel to fit the time frame or
No,
the time period
they
of what was
made it
going
look
on.
like cosplay sometimes, as if they were
Yeah,
cosplaying to these modern songs.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. But the other thing is, this is supposed to be more of a period piece, and I understand what she was trying to do because I read it, and, and she literally explained it to me, the director. But yeah, it didn't seem to make sense to me that a bunch of Converses in this time period.
I kind of love that play um, between different eras and kind of having this playfulness between two eras. And I think that sometimes it comes off as a little bit heavy-handed and gimmicky. It's like a little bit too much of a get what I'm doing, wink wink, don't you see it?
Yeah.
But it also makes things feel very kind of fun, and it makes it really fun, even though that you've got this kind of revolution on the horizon and things are not good. You've got this feeling that you're having a good time. It reminds me of Cher in Clueless, at the beginning of that movie. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, but she's like she also lives in this world of excess, and she's like picking out her outfits from a computer program, and it's like 1995, and but it's kind of got this excess that's very playful and very modern, but like Clueless, that's also an adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma. And even though it takes place in the modern day, there are these kinds of play between the past and the present that kind of creates this sense of what even is time, that I think is just fun. I think more than anything.
And that was actually in the dress design as well. Person who designed it, Canonero, Melina Canonero, she won an Oscar for the designs here. And the dresses aren't exactly 18th century authentic. Like a lot of like that pink outfit she wears at one point, she has this pink dress. That is a sort of blend of kind of post-feminist, post-punk colors, aesthetic with an 18th century mix. So that kind of anachronistic play you're talking about, Roxanne, I think it isn't just in the soundtrack. It's in the outfits themselves. They're not looking just for a kind of a replication of the past in the costumes, but a ode to um, post punk in the soundtrack, or modern speaking styles, right? They talk like modern women when they're all together and hanging out. I think you're right. I think the play, that kind of joyful play between past and present, is actually deeply inside of this film, and in the softness, in the costumes, and in the colors that are selected. Pink is far more prominent in this movie than it would have been in that time in France.
I was just gonna say it's in the casting too, right? When you cast Rip Torn as Louis the 15th, right? Like it's perfect, and yet you're like, what? And so you have this play between this kind of ridiculous casting that all this that's very deeply modern and deeply American, um, that is also somehow perfect and really fun too, because you get to have the moment you're like, Rip Torn, really? Okay, but great.
I don't mind the play of the different time periods, and there's many times in this movie where I thought they did it right. And again, with the costumes and everything, even in my initial thoughts, I think the actors did a wonderful job. Everything looked great. It's just there's a difference between having play and throwing a laced up sneaker in prominent direct and center on the screen. It kind of takes me out of what they're trying to do.
Well, what do you think they're trying to do?
Well, I know because she told me when I read about it that she was trying to show how she was kind of this, like, still this young, naive teenager, and just like it would have been in modern times. So I get, but I think I already got that from everything else that was going on. I didn't need to see that sneaker. And I don't want to, I just thought it was an interesting part of the film. And it'd be different if they threw these little things along the way. The other ones were softer touches, as you said, cosmetic color choices, even the music. That's where they lose me a little bit. But I think overall, I didn't buy into it throughout the whole film.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up after the announcement of the young prince, Kirsten Dunst has a bit of a breakdown, and she rushes back to her room and almost has a 360 closet scene without a closet. She 360s around these few walls in the corner of her room before the I Want Candy scene. And it reminded me a lot of Broken Blossoms. I didn't know if there was a direct reference there or not, but
You're looking for it now. We're always looking for people
everywhere. There's got to be a reason for that closet scene.
Putting it next to the I Want Candy montage really works well, because it's like it's a beautiful I don't want to say trap, because it's not like she had a choice, right? It's not like she could have gone somewhere else, right? It's a structured world. She's receiving all this luxury, and she is expected to do something in return. And watching her in that little moment, kind of against the wall, crying or moving in, not in 360, but in 180, 75, I think reveals that we're going to see her rewards and her privilege, but the thing that nobody asked her if she wants to do, which is kind of bear the responsibility of the continuation of this ancient regime.
Which also wasn't her fault either. It was
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah, it was like 7 years, and that was because like they either didn't understand how sex worked, or there were problems on his end. So I would imagine she felt like massively helpless as well.
They explicitly said there weren't problems on his end. They had a doctor inspect him and all that, if you remember in some of the dialogue. So I guess he was intimidated. I don't really know what the answer is.
Based on, I mean, this is not in the movie, but from what I read, it's a little bit in the movie. Joseph II, her brother, the letter he sends to his mother is, I think it is a pretty good translation of the letters that he actually were sending, which are pretty detailed about what Louis actually thought sex was, which involved putting it in, standing there for 2 minutes, and then going to bed. So apparently these people they didn't know, what to do. And she was, like you said, Roxanne, the 15th, I think, of 16 children, who was expected to do nothing.
Gosh. Well, I will say, talking about letters, the letters from the mother were amazing. They're just like, did you do it yet? Are you going to do it? Why haven't you done it?
Did I get that right? 15 out of 16?
It's many. It's in that zone.
Yeah.
It was too many.
Yeah.
Too many cooks in that kitchen.
But this is what you're saying, Nick. I said this when watching it too, was I think Maria Theresa, her mother, I want to see her movie. That woman was a powerful woman in Europe at that time. And she was a good politician from what I've read.
Well, Tom, that was a really interesting round. We'll be right back after these brief messages.
Talking Pictures Trivia Theater presents a screaming lapel pin production, The Jane of My Youth, a coming-of-age story of young love, read by me, Tom. Chapter 5, The Mad Scientist. Michael looked through the secret door into a dusty room. This room was set up like the theater of a Victorian medical school. Large, curved brown benches were arranged in a series of elevated ellipses looking down on a long metal table, large enough to comfortably seat 12 people. Oil lamps illuminated the massive room. Standing at the head of the table was Jane. Her strawberry blonde hair dangled over her shoulders. In her hands she held a small black welder. At the other end of the table stood a tall man with white hair. Michael couldn't see his face. It was covered with a black welder's mask. In the center of the table was what looked like a large superconducting magnet, a collection of metal discs stacked on top of one another, with a coil tightly wrapped around those discs. Jane was welding two ends of two wires together. The tall, white-haired man watched from across the table, unmoving. Behind them, on the back wall of the theater, a large electrical board more than 12 feet in height and covered in different colored lights and differently sized levers and buttons glowed. A rainbow of different colors vanished under the bright white sparks generated by the welding machine. Jane stopped and placed the welder down on the ground beside the table. The man removed his mask. He was clearly in his 60s, with wide blue eyes and a too thin face covered in wrinkled skin. "It's complete," the voice, crumpled leather. "The machine is ready. All we need now is the cube." Jane's authority chilled Michael. "I will get it now." The man turned and walked towards the back wall. He disappeared behind a door next to the complex machinery. Michael leaned forward and accidentally brushed against the door, causing it to squeak. He jumped back into the hallway, hoping no one heard him. "Is someone there?" "Oh, God," Jane's voice. He held his breath, waiting. He could hear her shoes ascending the stone theater, her voice a questioning threat. "Hello? Is someone there?" Michael jumped up and grabbed his bag and was about to run when Riley grabbed him by the shirt. Michael gasped. "Hey, Jane," Riley called, grabbing Michael. "I've got him." This has been a Talking Pictures Theater presentation of a Screaming Lapel Pin production, The Jane of My Youth, a coming-of-age story of young love. This week, Screaming Lapel Pins has on sale the allitrating satanic leaf-tailed gecko. Pick one up wherever Screaming Lapel Pins are sold.
And we're back. Tom, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. All right, our score so far is our caboose is KJ with -1, followed by Roxanne with 4, and Nick, since this is his favorite movie of all time, is in the lead with 5. All right, though, Nick, I do think you need to thank KJ for your massive lead.
Oh, definitely. He's the best player on my team.
He is the best player on your team.
Yeah, wait till round 2, huh?
All right. Each question is worth 2 points. Our alternative questions are worth 3 and 4 points. And so, as our esteemed guest, Roxanne, you are going to be able to start off with the categories. And round 2 is going to take place at Le Petit Trianon. So we've moved to the country estate. Here are the categories: Grand Habit de Cour, Robe in Gaule, and Bergère Gown. Which dress would you like to try on?
I would like to take the first category that I can't remember what you said it was.
Grand habit du corps. It's
Oui.
we. All right. Anybody like an alternative?
I'm in for the alternative, and
Mhm.
I got to target Nick again to get my. Well, I'm gonna try to get my points back, but
All right.
Is
Would
it
you
the
like
4 or the 3? Yeah.
which one would you like?
well, come on, just a 3. I don't want to. Let's just do the 3. Thank
Just
you.
the 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
just a 3.
And Nick, what would you like?
Normal question.
It's time for question 4.
So this is for Nick and Roxanne. What does Louis Auguste first say upon learning that his grandfather has died and he has become Louis XVI? For the alternative question, KJ targeting Nick, name Louis Auguste, later Louis XVI's, favorite hobby.
Locked in. Locked in. Locked in.
Ah,
Locked in.
I guess I'm locked in.
since Nick, you went last, what's the answer?
He said that he is no longer the Dauphin, he is now the king.
I think he says something along the lines as, and I won't dramatize it for you too much. Lord help us, we are too young to rule.
So my question was about Louis's favorite hobby.
Mhm.
And the obvious answer is hunting, because it's a major point in the movie that he often goes hunting. But another critical point is when his brother-in-law explains to him how locks and keys work. And I think that's one of his favorite hobbies are locks and keys.
Points are going to Roxanne, who will be getting 2 points. KJ, who's getting 3 points from Nick, which brings
Did
him
he
up.
target me? He just asked for the
He targeted
alternative.
you. He targeted you.
Stay on target.
Yeah.
No, did you?
And
Oh, yeah.
You actually
did,
say
yeah.
that first?
Yeah, I
I thought you
Yeah,
picked
yeah.
another category.
Yep.
There was a lot of category confusion, but yeah, target.
Yeah, and then Nick did not get any points for that round. What do we think of
Hold on.
Jason?
I don't even know where I'm at right now.
Okay, so point recap. KJ won this round, stealing 3 points from you,
Okay,
which
so
brings his total up
2.
to 2.
And then I'm at 2.
You are at 2, and Roxanne is now in the lead with 6.
Good job, KJ.
Okay.
It's
Way
always
to
for
be
the
a
catch.
disruptor. Yep. Good work, all. I'm kind of interested in what was really interesting choices Jason Schwartzman's Louis XVI and how he's portrayed and how he's treated, by the director throughout this film. And I was wondering what you guys thought of him.
I'll just say it. I thought he was really good. I thought he did a great job.
I thought it was Jason Schwartzman as Jason Schwartzman, which I also really like because he plays himself in everything, but it's just this kind of earnest, quiet, awkward, plain, spoken dude that I just kind of. It's good. I like Jason Schwartzman.
It worked as part of the modern era invading the timepiece. But I don't think he was ever in time. I think he was always a Converse shoe in this movie.
Yeah, I like that.
And I would say, even with my strong opinions towards the sneaker, I think he was a successful play with the modern. So I do agree with you there. Just this is not a serious item, but there was, just to give you a little bit of his image in the movie, there's a scene where he's about to go off on a hunt and he gets on the horse and he just has this really awkward wave with like a little flourish, like that doesn't make sense for the time. It's like, bye-bye. like it just didn't make sense to me. But for some reason, it was a very subtle thing and I enjoyed it. So his awkward wave goodbye to the queen when he goes off to a hunt is kind of an example of how he portrays this role.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting take on, showing this very awkward form of masculinity that is kind of a problem for the court, and it's almost like you can kind of see this as like, oh, this isn't going to be the image of France we need. It's not even that they're too young to rule. It's that that there's something that is inherently, you know, not right. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that's what I believe, but like, there's this kind of the awkwardness of his masculinity kind of makes you think like smell that there's something not right about this particular monarchy, especially in relationship to the previous king. There's such a stark difference there between Rip Torn and Jason Schwartzman, right? Like, that is some cool casting in that way.
Yeah, France needed a king, and they got a guest star on Friends, which allowed Kirsten Dunst to shine, or Marie Antoinette to shine. But yeah, it did not work out well for France.
I think it also reveals the like you're saying, Roxanne, sort of the flaws in the system, right? You get this guy who's like you're saying, his masculinity isn't mocked, nor is
Right.
like nor does it compromise her femininity, right? It's not like he's really domineering or controlling. Like he said, we're too young to rule, and he also is the wrong person to rule, like you're saying. He isn't virile, he isn't domineering. He does kind of what the loudest person in the room does when he has those little councils about whether or not to fund America, which really becomes a problem at the end of the movie because they don't have any money left because they funded us. Thank you.
Yeah,
But
thanks for ruining yourselves and going into a lot of debt for us.
yeah, it worked out well.
Isn't that the American way?
Yeah.
But I really had that kind of appreciation because I think through him, it's more clear that this is a system that can't persist. That it's a beautiful dream that's going to come to an end.
He's also a product of generations of that system. He's molded and weakened by these different social graces and protocols and all that he grew up in. And yes, the fact that he got into that level of power at such a young age, I mean, he can't even figure out what to do with his wife, let alone a country.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that so by the time we get to Louis the 16th, the main monarch to bring Versailles and all of its rules and regulations and this and that, and making Versailles what it was Louis the 14th, which was two monarchs previous, but several generations removed, because there's like it keeps going like, grandson or whatever. So there's been like generations of kind of living in this very enclosed way of living in society that kind of creates kings that aren't actually attuned to anything going on, and are just, like Marie herself, right? She's kind of just out of touch. It's a similar thing that's happening with him. He's grown inside a bubble his entire life. He's Jake Gyllenhaal in that one movie, Bubble Boy, I believe, but in Versailles instead.
And this movie purposely keeps us, the audience, in that same bubble. I think very rarely or very infrequently we actually see the plights of the peasantry and all that. And even what Tom was saying in an earlier discussion, we only hear, for the most part, we only hear the challenges outside. There is a scene where Marie Antoinette does go on the balcony and sees everyone, but very rarely do we see it in this film.
So now I'm going to ask KJ to pick the category: robe en galle or bergère gown.
I'll go robe en galle.
All right. Anybody want an alternative to that?
Can I?
AJ
I'm
can
still kind of
choose the
confused. Can I? Am I?
You can choose the
I can,
alternative
right?
for that.
You can.
Okay.
Anyone is free to choose the
Last
alternative.
time
There's one left worth 4 points, or you can choose a target.
I'm Pat Gavining this. I don't want these are good questions. I will go 4, and I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to target Nick.
You don't want to target Roxanne.
Roxanne is the
She's got
strategy.
6 points.
I see what you're saying.
I don't know what's happening, so I'm just having a good time.
Yeah, but so just for the audience, some quick math. So if I target Nick or I
Mhm.
will get the 4 points.
Yes.
If I target Roxanne, this could boost her to, Final Jeopardy supremacy.
Mhm.
So I think.
Oh, I see.
Strategy.
So I'm going to target
Okay,
Nick.
very good. All right. So anybody else want to jump on the alternative? This is the last alternative of the game.
So talking strategy, if I wanted to be vindictive and target back, it really wouldn't make any sense unless, well, that could be a really big swing, actually.
Yeah. If
depending on
one of us
how-
get it and one of us don't, that's an
Yeah.
8-point.
I'm gonna go slow and steady wins the race here. Just standard question for me, and hopefully KJ's points.
Okay, and Roxanne, what would you like to do?
I think I'll just take the old standy.
Okay. All right. Since we have two people taking the standy,
I'm taking standard question. Thank you very much.
yep, standard question. I will read that first, then I'll read KJ's question.
It's time for question 5.
After having her daughter, Maria Therese, Maria Antoinette receives Le Petit Trianon as a gift and begins to spend much of her time playing peasant in the country. What author do we see her reading in this country estate? Now, KJ, your target at Nick. What line of dialogue is stated in a scene filmed inside the imagination of a rumor?
Cha-ching! Oh, I guess I have to say locked in. Did I say that or not?
Locked in.
I think I know the rumor, but I'm trying to think. All right, locked in.
All right, KJ. Now I have to make you do it. 4 points.
4 points. So unfortunately for me, fortunately for Nick, I don't know the answer, but I'd like to quote Flight of the Conchords.
Okay.
Alufafa. Alufafa fa fa fa. I believe was the line of dialogue.
Okay, thank you. That is very endearing. Roxanne, what do you have for your answer?
Can I answer KJ's question?
You can.
It's let them eat cake, right?
It is. Yep.
Okay.
Get out of here.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
All I had to say
All
was
right.
the only thing Marie Antoinette is known for.
Yep. The answer is simple. It's the question is phrased in a way to make you think through it.
Wow.
For my own question,
Mhm.
I don't know, so I'm gonna pick Moliere.
Okay. And Nick, what do you have?
Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes.
Oh, yes. Don Quixote is the answer to a book in every single episode. Okay. So
So I get the points?
no. So but you do get 4 points from KJ.
All right.
So that puts you up at 6. KJ, you had 2 points, and now you're down to -2. And then Roxanne, you are still at 6 because you didn't get that answer. So now
What is it? What's
the answer is Rousseau.
That was my second guess.
She's reading. Whoa. For our listeners, Roxanne just gave me a death stare. But yeah, she's reading Rousseau. And so the points after the 5th question are Roxanne and Nick are tied at 6. And Kevin, you're not catching up. You're at -2.
I still got a chance of being at 0, though. Let's make that clear.
You do have a chance at being at 0.
We
A
could
good
both
man.
We could both target KJ.
No, there's no
You
alternate
can,
questions
yeah.
left, right? There's no
There's no alternative, yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
They off target.
sorry, KJ. I was gonna target you, but
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm asked this question especially about the Rousseau one, and then we'll go into the let them eat cake thing. I'm interested in kind of the pastoral scenes and the kind of the constructing of the pastoral as something that she considers natural, returning to natural, but is entirely made up, by her and her gardener. And I was wondering what people thought of that and how that fictitious construction was treated in this film.
It reminded me of what I wish that I would have had when I was a kid, when I was like playing house and like doing, it's like, all right, we're going to get all this fake food and it's going to be amazing. And okay, you over there, you're going to pretend to do that. And it's like a 6-year-old's dream, and it kind of I think, she's supposed to be a grown woman with kids at this point, right? And we know that she isn't a child, right? Like she's not childish exactly, but she is a little childish, right? She has no exposure to anything, and her greatest dream is to or her best way of imagining peace is to go out and basically like pay people to help her play house. Um and like have people like be like actors like pretending to be farmers and like milking cows or whatever, which sounds great to what I was doing in Ohio when I was 6. And honestly it kind of sounds fun now, but I think that's just called reenactment.
She actually, like a little kid putting on plays and performances for her friends, she actually does have little shows that she puts on for her guests in that too. So that seems to be in that type of bubble. There is one scene, and I don't know if this jumped out at any of you, that she's in her home away from home. So here she is, she's listening to music, and there's like 3 gentlemen sitting around. It was just like an awkward scene. I don't know what the purpose of that scene was. Does anyone recall what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they're playing guitar.
Yes, or
Right, they're playing guitar
or lute or something.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it just was like, talk about surreal. It just seemed.
It was
Yeah.
like, anyway, here's Wonderwall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It just was kind of out there.
Yeah, a lot of that. I think. Well, I don't know what to say about the brief lute scene.
Nor did I.
mean, yeah, it's I mean, she goes outside after that, so maybe she also was tired of stuffy lute music in a big hallway. But while well, with Roxanne, what you said about this is that this is like playing house and paying people to play house. I think the movie still uh, respects that instinct or that desire in her. That there's still this kind of little, because when we have this kind of montage of her with her daughter walking in the tall grass, and teaching her daughter like blue. This is blue, which the little girl says in French. And also, Nick, you had mentioned this earlier when the guests come to visit and they're very upset, and she goes, this is supposed to be my place away from all of this. Um, so I think that the movie is in no way judging her for the reality that we're still in a bubble, that the pastoral is an idyllic playtime event construction reality. I still think it recognizes that it serves this need that she has throughout the movie. Either that need is expressed in in exuberance and the too muchness of fashion and style and art, or it's expressed in this hope for something simpler, right? It's almost like she's maybe not exactly flailing for something to hold on to while she's drowning. I don't think it's that dramatic, but uh, it is turning about to look for something that is freeing. And I think this is kind of another way that she does that.
And it's also, if you think about like the beginning of the movie too, when she's with her mom and her mom's like, hey, you're marrying the dauphin, bye. She's never had anything like that. So it's not like it's like, I'm going to go back to basics. I'm going to create something of my own that belongs to me, even if like these are kind of elements that I'm grasping from everywhere. This is going to be like my little private extension of myself. That is something that she's never had before. She's never had this kind of any kind of pastoral idyllic home space at all. She's been one of the youngest kids of a bazillion of them, and she's grown up at court with all sorts of people who we don't see. But the point is that like she's creating something that it also seems to belong to her as well for the first time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It happens after she gives birth to a child. So after she's able to quell the kind of rumor of her frigidity, or that the fact that she's not doing her duty. We now have evidence she's doing her duty, and with that power, she's able to grab something that is now hers. Right? That seems to be what I think Coppola is indicating, regardless of if that's actually how it happened.
And she's able to give her kids a childhood that she probably dreamed about as well, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, you see like all the different kinds of who was it who brought up the her daughter in the grass and these kinds of scenes that are just very mellow. And it's like you're watching some kind of like spa relaxation video. But it does seem to be like a giving her kid something that she would have liked. And it's also an interesting contrast to what is going to come too. That her son, I believe, dies in prison. The daughter escapes, but like this is going to be the nicest and happiest time in their life. So when you think of it that way too, it's super dark.
And I also wanted to touch on with the alternative question, the picturing of her that is created kind of by history, and in this film it's also created by the rabbling middle class who want to kill her. We get, I think, two instances of the rumor created Marie Antoinette, the Marie Antoinette we think we know. At the beginning, the first shot is of her kind of sitting in a chaise, having, I think, a shoe adjusted, and then eating a little bit of icing. And then the other one is in that scene where she says, "Let them eat cake," which is filmed as this, kind of surreal little rumor. And I think both those scenes present the Marie Antoinette you think it's that type of thing. It's the person of luxury who isn't that's not entirely inaccurate, but the movie very much addresses Marie Antoinette as a construct. And I was wondering what people thought of that.
Well, I guess you kind of get that if you think about it in terms of the way that we're talking about the past and present playing with each other too. The film is really willing to mix legend and history and rumors into this kind of not cobbled together because that sounds like it's not done thoughtfully, but a pastiche, I suppose, of that you get embodied in Kirsten Dunst. And sometimes it feels very discombobulating because sometimes it, especially like when she speaks, the dialogue in my mind I didn't love. And I think that kind of disparity comes, this kind of, and it's not just the modern dialogue too, it's the kind of who is Marie Antoinette supposed to be. So when she finally kind of says something, you're not really sure from where it's coming, what Marie is speaking now. Is this just the woman? Is this part of the legend? Is this part of, who's talking right now? I guess sometimes it's clearer than others too. They sometimes they can make it pretty clear who's talking, but sometimes it's a lot, and maybe it's intentionally ambiguous too, to kind of lead us through that that question of like, who is Marie Antoinette?
Yeah, I agree. I think the book scenes where you have this kind of scripted dialogue as opposed to when they're partying, which seems kind of improv. Seems like what they're speaking when they're in these different parties. It seems like that a lot of that dialogue seems improvised. The book seem stilted, right? The book seems they don't seem like this is things real people say. And you're right. She seems less the character she's playing in those scenes.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because the movie is so much about the beauty of fashion and embracing that kind of attitude, and celebrating it. It's about that kind of celebration. And the book scenes, that come towards the end are really, about kind of maybe closing off this chapter or whatnot. I mean, they're functional, and that's kind of the problem. This isn't a movie about about a functioning plot line that moves us from A to B to C. It's about this kind of celebration. It's about decadence. It's about going to the party and seeing how people act at the party and flirt and what they wear. It's like pretending that the Oscars have a plot. I think that's the problem. And I think the how how much love Coppola has for the clothes and the shoes, for me, came out in that in that moment when she says let them eat cake, the kind of the fake scene when she says let them eat cake, because it isn't Marie Antoinette, right? It's this ugly thing that doesn't care about people. And it's not that Marie Antoinette has a great consciousness or something like that. She's simply just not aware. um, but her decadence is, while something that has to expire, it is also something that is to be admired, not to be mocked or degraded.
I think what you just articulated showcases my challenges with this film. I don't think it's a bad film, but all the time it took to showcase that and build it up, and that's the part where I actually enjoyed more of the historical context and all that. So that, to me, I think this movie wasn't designed for me as an audience. And just it was funny to hear you say that, because everything you were saying of what was probably clearly intended was the challenges I had with the film.
Yeah, it's not a movie about the plot of history or something like that. It's not a movie about plot, right? It's
I'm a sucker for a little plot. What can
yeah. I mean,
say?
there's a little plot in there, but really,
Yeah, it's the most frustrating thing for me too. I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't doing anything. And like I love the dresses and I love the hair and I love the shoes, but sometimes I'm just like, okay.
yeah,
At least I wasn't alone.
yeah. I like too muchness. I think I like the quality of something being too much, even if it can, exhaust you a little bit.
I had too much of too
Yeah,
much.
too much or too much.
The montage, where it's like the food and the the clothes and that thing with the shoes and everything, I was like, oh, almost plot. We kind of know what's happening. It's the plot of the montage for once.
Mhm.
And it was like 40 seconds of non-plot plot bliss.
This movie might have done better in another era on TNT. It's one of those movies you can jump in and out of any scene because the lack of plot and the eye candy. So I wonder if something like Shawshank Redemption, if this would have done well on Sunday afternoons on a network station or something.
I like that we've compared this to Shawshank. That's I think the most beautiful
We
thing
have
so
not.
far.
KJ has.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Yes.
This is the Shawshank Redemption of period films.
This is really the Shawshank Redemption of the 2000s.
So correct me if I'm wrong. There's still one question. For a second, I thought we were in.
No, we
movie
have the
room.
last question, and it's the tiebreaker, because it looks to me that Roxanne and Nick both have 6 points, and that makes this last question very, very interesting, because not only is it going to be the tiebreaker, but it is subjective. Are we ready for this last question? Bergère gown is the name of the category.
It's time for question 6.
The picture ends with Marie Antoinette saying goodbye to Versailles as the revolutionaries take her and her family away to be executed, closing the door temporarily on hundreds of years of Bourbon rule and permanently ending a way of life. In your opinion, does this world have to end? You may use historical evidence if you like, but your answer must be in regard to what you feel the film is saying.
Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in. This movie says that this world does have to end. The nation of France simply cannot afford the war, the lifestyle, the monarchy, the excess, everything in this movie um, comes down to the one scene or maybe 2 scenes where Louis is with his consultants and they're telling him, hey, we got to send money to America. And he says, sure, whatever you say. And it's that spending of the money that does not allow the uh, aristocrats to perpetuate forever.
I think that this movie is stating that this world has already ended, and this is the last remnants of it in this bubble of Versailles. So France has changed, everything around them has changed. There's a revolution happening in the Americas. Everyone is moving on from the monarchies and aristocracy, and Versailles is finally being affected by this. So I would say that it's already happened. And even the way this movie ends, which is what I've been biting my tongue on this whole time, we know from historical context what happens to the king and queen, but this movie does not take us there. All we see in this movie is that they are escorted in a carriage away from Versailles. Only in real life do we know their brutal end happened at the edge of a guillotine. So I would say this movie is not really focused on the ending because it already has ended and they're just getting caught up.
So I think that's a really good point. I would say that it's not necessarily that it already has ended, but I think that the movie definitely thinks that it has to end and it is in the process of ending. Like, it's kind of like the dominoes have already been pushed, as it were. It's happening, it's imminent, it's coming. But what I think that the film is more invested in, I think, than anything is mourning that, and not necessarily maybe mourning the what you could maybe probably definitely see as exploitation of other people in order to kind of perpetuate their lifestyle, but mourning the freedom within that bubble, the being able to be detached, being able to exist outside and alone, and just that excess, it's not going to come back, right? And what I think is really telling is that one of those last scenes where they kind of it's just the bedroom that's completely like destroyed. It's very mournful, right? Look at what this glory used to be, and here it is in shambles. So it's very much, I think, invested in the memory of it, and even though that it can't come back, and it won't, it's literally broken, that it's important to kind of remember and in some ways maybe bring it back and feel it again, which is exactly what the movie is trying to do, right? Is bring all those images back again and have us experience those same kind of like feelings of luxury and just enjoyment and excess.
All right. And the points go to, of course, Roxanne.
Son of a... I didn't talk long enough.
Exactly it. I counted the words everyone said.
I'm much more concise.
That was one word. It was one
Mourn,
word.
yeah.
Tom, mourn. Right?
Yeah,
That had
I
to be-
think
yeah,
that
that's-
the
mhm.
ending, I think, yeah, mourning is a great way. That's what I wrote everybody's answers down, or kind of as quickly as I could. So
Wow.
yeah. Yeah.
We don't have enough time for you to
Okay, I
reread
won't.
them.
Yeah, but I think that idea of mourning, it was kind of like mourning versus post-apocalyptic, right? We're just kind of mixing. The world is over, and we're kind of dancing in the ashes.
No, I'm saying their world is over.
Yeah,
There's a new world.
yeah, their world is over, and it's post-apocalyptic for their world. And they've been dancing in the ashes. And I think that, the last scene is yeah, in mourning for this world, even though it does have to end. And I think that is correct. And I was wondering what people thought of that last scene.
Well, that's what I've been
Yeah,
wanting to
no,
talk
Nick's
about
been dying.
pretty much this whole time. If you didn't have historical context, it almost looks like they just were escorted out of their house. Are they going to jail? What's going to happen to them? Oh, they're no longer in power. We all know that they get executed. And the movie
glosses over that fact. That's not and I understand that's not the point of the movie, but that's also my challenge with the movie. Even if we do modern elements, if these are based on historical characters and these are the pivotal points of their demise and the end of the story, I felt like it should have been somewhat included.
I think though that it kind of wants to not linger in that. It wants to be like, remember how cool this was? Remember how awesome this party was? Like, instead of like, remember how the cops were called and then we all got ticketed. I think it's like trying to live in like the party rather than like everybody getting a record.
I agree with you. That is what the director was trying to show.
Yeah.
I agree, but I'm also kind of there with you, Nick. I was waiting for that scene. It would kind of be like seeing a Titanic movie that ended with, oh, and everybody's still having a good time. It's sailing to the
true.
sunset and roll credits.
Yeah, but they're not sailing to the sunset.
We
in
don't
the
know
end,
where they're
right?
going.
They're
They
off.
just got escorted up.
Yeah,
You can't be in your house anymore.
I mean, if you're going to see a movie called Marie Antoinette, you probably know a little something about what happens to Marie Antoinette, right? The director can assume some knowledge on your part. It's like going to see a movie about Lincoln.
Yeah, but I'll
know,
tell you,
just
I'll tell you this. I
what-
knew a little bit about this. When the movie ended and that was the end sequence, I went online to figure out what exactly happened because I know roughly, but I would expect the movie about like that character to kind of wrap up in the conclusion. So he was killed first and some time had passed and then she was killed. But like none of that, I didn't know that.
But it's not about. I mean,
I'm not arguing that
I
wasn't
think it
the
can-
intent of the movie.
yeah,
I'm saying
it-
that's the
so
movie I
even if you don't
wanted
know-
to see.
yeah, but even if you don't know she dies, you know it's over.
Yeah.
Right, we know. I mean, the tone makes that clear. This is over. We're done. And she says, "I'm saying goodbye." It's the last line. And then Roxanne, as you pointed out, the last shot is of Versailles broken, right? Of the door off the hinge, the chandelier down. This world is over. This is a graveyard now. So even if we don't know exactly when she died or if she's dead, the part she played is done with. And I think the movie, like you're saying, Roxanne, the movie doesn't want to dwell in despair. I think it's clear that this world has to end because they're getting into debt. There are people who are starving because they're being taxed to pay for a war that will make the British look bad. That's their justification for why they're adding these taxes to these poor
Own
people.
the Brits. Let's go into debt
Yeah,
to own the
yeah, we were.
Brits.
Yeah, it's all about owning the Brits. She's, like at one point she's declared what, Queen of Debt? Is
Yeah,
that what
something
they?
like that.
I think that is something.
Something like that. Yeah, which was a little awkward. They posted on the picture, but anyway, but I think if you show the bloody consequences, what you're doing is is in a sort of way compromising or judging the beauty of the world from which she comes. Not that it doesn't deserve a little judgment, but that's not what's happening here, I don't think. I think in this world, we are going to afford Marie Antoinette, a person who really doesn't have a voice, though she does have a tremendous amount of privilege. We're going to afford her world, and we're going to appreciate her world and the challenges that her world afforded her, and the beauties of it, the great beauties of it. I mean, to say that fashion is frivolity is stupid. It's art. It's it's maybe one of the best arts because you could like feel it and wear it and be contained in it. And recognize that the privileges of this world are um, are also quite they're quite beautiful, I guess. And it's a moment to enjoy that.
Well, Tom, this was another good movie. Again, there was a lot of rich conversation here, and I'm sure we have a few more nuggets of wisdom to go over right after these quick messages.
It's time for Guess That Song, Whistling Edition. I'll whistle a song, and you guess what it is. Here we go. If you guessed Man, I Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain, you're right.
And we're back.
It's time for Movie Rant.
One of the things I thought this movie did really well was made Kirsten Dunst look like a foreigner in France. Everybody kind of looked the same. I mean, they were all, but for some reason, she always looked different than everybody else. And the only thing I could think of was the makeup. I think her makeup was done to a much lesser degree than the French. So she stood out without calling attention to that. And I thought that was really nicely done.
I'm sure someone can pick holes at what I'm about to say, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the other lead females were brunettes and had darker hair. And
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good point.
she was blonde. I
Yeah.
think that's also why, and she was fair, and I think that's another element of why she seemed foreign in the group.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't think of any other blonde woman in that movie.
The daughter was the only
Okay,
one I
yeah,
can
yeah.
think of, but that is, again, her daughter.
Yeah, that's a good point. She is like, she physically is kind of
Mhm.
different from
They didn't
the
And
even
I'm
make
sure
the,
that's on purpose.
they didn't even make the Swedish guy, Jamie Dornan's character, who's supposed to be Swedish. I'm not all
Brunette. Yeah,
Swedes
he's a brunette.
are blonde. I mean, I'm very Norwegian and I'm very dark, but like, you know, you would think that would be the opportunity, especially because they have an affair, right? Like to kind of show likeness in looks, but they didn't really take that opportunity as much as you might think. Maybe they're like, well, Jamie Dornan, you know what?
he's bangable, yeah.
I think it was a stylistic choice. I think that was a stylistic choice.
Yeah, what did you think of her performance, Christine Dunst, or anyone's?
I think in general, the cast across the board did a great job. That's why when I have my critiques, it's not really about how do I put it? It's not critiquing that this is a bad movie. It's just not my movie.
It's not your cup of tea.
Yeah, I was looking for a and we even said these phrases before, historical biopic. I actually don't necessarily think it was. It was more about this idea centered around Marie Antoinette, not necessarily her life story. I know that's kind of weird to say because we go through some of her life, but that wasn't really the focus. It was the excess, it was the decadence, it was the lifestyle, it was the generation, it was that, that's really what they focused on, not so much the historical facts and figures.
Yeah, there was a lot of that, as we discussed in this episode. I think if there was a plot, I think if there was another thing to watch during this movie, it might have been too much. I think the lack of plot allowed the audience to sit with the colors and the dresses and the excess. I think that was a good thing for the movie. I think it would have been too much if there was much more in this movie.
If you're into that.
And I also kind of like how it lets you, a lot of the scenes are with Marie. I think almost every scene, like she's in it in some capacity. It's not like ever usually from another. I mean, there are a couple. I think there's one with a couple with the Dauphin by himself and that kind of thing. But more or less, you're getting this kind of from the same space as Marie Antoinette, and a lot of times it's when she's with like her girlfriends, and it allows you sort of to sit in with that group of girlfriends and be part of the chatter and the gossip. But then obviously it has you like those the moments that are like literally behind closed doors when she's like sobbing because everybody hates her because she hasn't had a kid yet. But it lets you kind of be close to her or within her social group as well. You get to experience a little bit of the clickiness that might have been going on in her life. Also, I love the wigs in this movie. I know that's not related, but like the hair situation, the wig.
Powder too, a lot of powder.
Yeah.
Powder, even if they didn't have a wig, it seemed like their hair was powdered.
Yeah.
The wig where she has to stand up into the shot
Yeah,
because her
yeah,
hair
yeah.
is so big that they have the camera set and she stands up and the wig goes into the shot and out of the shot because this is so large.
And it also looks like it's about
And
to
she's
like fall out. like the pieces of like
Yeah,
horsehair that are supposed to be in there. It's like that's
yeah,
gonna fall off.
yeah.
Put some, glue it, glue it.
It's not too much, she says. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a great point. They're kind of sitting in on sitting in on the click and seeing how the click evolves. And they were individualized too. I think like Roseburn and then Roseburn's character and then Nye's character as well.
Lambeau.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Princess Lambeau were distinct personalities that that even though they don't necessarily have a plot arc, they don't have a plot arc at all. You know, we still had a very nice and clear vision of who these
They
people
felt
were.
sometimes like they were different sides of Marie Antoinette, like kind of like the angel and devil on her shoulders, like kind of like telling her to do different things. It's like, oh my, and like who is she going to listen to? Which little kind of minion on each shoulder is she going to take, you know, advice from? But that's kind of, I guess, what it felt like to me.
Another thing I was interested in is like this idea of pageantry, which you get in a few different ways. Is you know, it manifests in, first of all, in like the Catholic rituals we get, the wedding and the daily attention to mass. Also the, you know, the crowning of the king and that great scene where they're walking in that blue carpet with the fleur de lis over it as he's just been crowned Louis XVI. And also the kind of the pageantry of even the theater and kind of the customs of the theater. I found that very interesting. And I've had a quote from, I'll just read this quickly, a quote from Stephanie Zarakayak, who's a film reviewer who I really love, whose work I haven't read in a long time, but this is what she wrote about the movie for Salon, and I was wondering what people thought. Quote, but there's another possible explanation for Coppola's attraction to beauty and splendor, as we see it in Marie Antoinette. Maybe it stems less from a girly love of glamour than a Catholic taste for pageantry and excess, a taste that her father and her fellow Italian-American filmmaker contemporaries, Martin Scorsese and Brian De Palma, have shown in their movies. The lush draperies and ornaments of Versailles are baldly ecclesiastical, perfectly fitting for rulers who were supposed to be guided by God. Why wouldn't Coppola be attracted to that setting? I was wondering what people thought of that, because that she wrote a lot in that review, which I love that review, but that quote, that paragraph really jumped out at me. I was wondering if people thought that was too much, or if that suits the kind of the pageantry of the film.
When I think of Catholicism, I often think of pretty strict rules and I mean, some of the music's good, but I'm going to use a word boring. It's very structured. It's, you know, if somebody like puts any inflection on their voice, everybody looks up and is like, oh, wow, thank you. That was great. That's so much. Well, I don't want to get too into it, but, and in this movie, there's, there's a lot of using the modern, I know we said this a lot, but there's a lot of using modern music. There's a lot of upbeat, so that the pageantry to me did not feel Catholic. But while Sofia Coppola was sitting in mass, maybe she was dreaming of this movie to give her something to think about while you know, I don't know if anybody listening has been to mass, but there's a lot of time to think sometimes in mass, and so maybe it's a reaction to that Catholic pageantry, but I don't think the pageantry in the movie was similar to Catholicism.
I don't think her point is that it's like a Catholic pageantry. I think it's the idea of the excessive decor that comes along with the pageantry in those specific rituals. I think that's that kind of idea. This sort of guided by God beauty. And it's also an absolute monarch, right? Louis XVI is an absolute monarch, which means he is appointed by God to rule France. And I think I think Zarakayak's point is that the fashion, the gilding, the rooms, the furniture is all sort of informed by, you know, the kind of this greater glory, or it's got this greater point or greater mission that the absolute monarch is going towards, or this greater authority that the absolute monarch is taking from. And I was wondering if that registered in any other way in the movie.
And we will now be presenting the Chuck Taylors that were appointed to the feet of God.
So no.
I mean, there were scenes with religious undertones and the fact that they have procedures and protocols and all that. What I would say, I don't know if I directly relate to that article or that excerpt from that article, but I will say that she definitely had a love affair with the decadence and everything that came along with it through that time. But you could definitely see she was passionate about all of that. And I think for me that overtook the movie, but that definitely, there was passion for that lifestyle, this fantasy lifestyle, if you will, even though it is based on historical context.
I think though too, for all the pageantry and all this divinely given or deserved pageantries, right? There's a lot of irreverence in the movie, like the Chuck Taylors featured in there, and a lot of the kind of like sidelong looks and like the kind of, you know, winks that are continually going on throughout the movie. So it's also undercutting it while it's also celebrating it, which doesn't seem really to jive with maybe it completely with what that critic is saying. I can't remember their name.
Yeah, it's Stephanie Zarek, but
Yeah, okay.
Well, this definitely was another fun one to discuss, Tom. I'd like to once again congratulate Roxanne for winning this week. All right.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
what I will say is we really appreciate you joining us today. It was a blast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I had a great time. This was wonderful. I've really been looking forward to doing this with you guys.
Would you have said the same thing if you didn't win this episode?
You know what? Maybe.
That's fair. That's fair. Sounds good. Well, I'd also like to thank our dignified editor, KJ, who masterfully crafts these episodes. I'd also like to acknowledge IMDb, which is a great resource for movie information. Check out our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com, for more information about us and our episodes. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher, as well as our YouTube channel. We are extremely grateful for any positive reviews, as those help others like you find us. If you like what you hear, remember to like and subscribe to our show. Join us next time when we discuss Nick's recommendation, which is my recommendation, from 1988, Coming to America. Not to be confused with the upcoming sequel, Coming to America. Should be a fun one. Haven't seen this in a while, and I'm looking forward to it, so I hope you are too. See you then. Ding, 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 ding. Roxanne is quite familiar with Jane Austen and her works, but we are discussing Marie Antoinette today. I made the mistake when we introduced it last time.
Every time I'm talking to Rachel, she's like, "It's not Mary, it's Marie." Like now you've infected the rest of us with that, Nick.
I don't even know where I got it from. Is any of that salvageable, or do I have to reread that?
I would, if you don't mind, just
try it again. Yeah, Roxanne.
Roxanne is quite familiar.
Roxanne is quite familiar with Jane Austen and her works, but we are discussing Marie Antoinette today. I did it again. I did it again. Now it's like a mental block.
It's going to be a rough podcast.
Okay, let's try this one more time.